You're listening to Strange by Nature, your guide to the strange, weird, unbelievable, and improbable wonders of the natural world.
Hello everyone, thanks for being here today. I am Kirk Mona and I am joined today by Rachel Ginza and Victoria Thompson. We are all professional naturalists who together have scoured the world for weird and wonderful wonders just to please your mammalian brain's desire for novelty. Isn't that nice? Let's do this.
All right, so today I'm going to get us started. And I'm actually really excited. This one has been on my list for a little while. It's one of those topics that most people wouldn't think about as being strange, but I think it's kind of strange when you get into some of the nitty-gritty stuff.
Okay.
So I'm going to cover what's generally considered the first broadleaf tree.
Oh, all right.
Okay. First in terms of like evolution?
Yes. So not like the oldest living tree or anything like that, like the first broadleaf tree that evolved.
Okay.
All right, cool.
So coniferous trees evolved about 300 million years ago, and this order evolved about 290 million years ago. And it's not a flowering tree. So it's not an angiosperm.
Okay, so it's a broadleaf tree, but not
an angiosperm. Okay.
Not an angiosperm, which would be like the oaks and maples that we generally have around
right.
everywhere.
I'm trying to think if I can think what this tree is. Is this one I'm going to be familiar with?
I guarantee both of you have seen this tree.
I have a guess.
Okay,
I'll see if my guess is right. I'll write it on a little piece of paper here.
Okay, so this tree has been around so long that it's the only species left in its division, which is one below like clade, which is below kingdom in like scientific order. It's the only one left in the class, left in the order, left in the family, and left in its genus. It is a living fossil, having been unchanged for the past 200 million years.
Okay, I think I know what you're going to say.
It is the ginkgo biloba.
Yay!
Exactly. Yay!
So the name ginkgo, generally speaking, most of us know it as just ginkgo. That's also its common name. Its genus name is also its common name, which makes sense because it's the only one left in all of those bits. It's actually found in mainland China. That's generally where it is, and is technically an endangered species because in the wild, you do not see them. They get shaded out by a lot of the other trees.
Okay.
It's also found in Korea and in Japan, and its original name is thought to be a misrendering of the Japanese words for jin, meaning silver, and kayo, meaning apricot. So silver apricot, meaning kind of harkening back to the fruit of this particular tree.
Yes.
I say fruit, quotations there. It's not a real fruit, but we'll get into that. So
I'm really curious to hear more about that.
Yeah,
I always thought it was a fruit.
Yeah, so it's kind of a fruit, but not really. It's not a true fruit.
Sounds strange.
Yes, doesn't it? So this is a commonly, for us nowadays, it is used very much as a street tree, but only the males, which we will get into.
Right, so that's where most people would have seen this, is like, along a boulevard or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
They try to plant only the males. They don't always succeed.
No, they don't always succeed.
No, they don't. It sounds like you have experience with the female ginkgo trees there.
Oh, there are several in my neighborhood. Yes, there's a certain time of the fall when we experience what I'm sure going to talk about.
Oh, we will. So when you're walking down the street, some ways that you can tell that you're looking at a ginkgo tree. This can actually be a fairly large tree. It can be anywhere from 66 to 115 feet tall. which I didn't know because any ginkgo trees I've seen have not been that tall, but they are very slow growing. So it takes them a very, very long time to get to that height. However, they can live up to about 1,000 years.
What?
Whoa.
Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah, so one of these trees can live to be about 1,000 years old. I don't think we found any that are up there. I think the oldest one we found is about 665 years old, which is, don't get me wrong, still very old.
So how do they know it can live to be 1,000?
Science. That's how I'm going to say. I think they were able to tell, like, it wasn't dead or anything like that. It was still a living tree, and they were able to, like, extrapolate that. I'm not sure. I'm not a
Or did they find a
dendrologist,
dead ginkgo that was, and they counted the rings and it was 1,000 years old?
Also entirely possible.
We don't know.
We don't know.
And by we, I just mean the three of us.
Well, listeners,
Yeah, we don't.
If you want to do some research on your own and tell us on social media, we would be fascinated to hear.
I would love that.
Do our job for us.
I think Rachel was really hoping that was the one question we wouldn't ask.
So much. I have so many notes for everything else, and there's some cool things. Okay.
Gotcha.
So the crown, the overall shape of this tree, when it gets like taller and bigger, is kind of angular. It's kind of cone shaped. It's not like a big old circle or like that we see a lot of times with other trees. So that's crown is generally going to be more angular. It really was one of the first like broadleaf trees to exist. Before this, it was just like needle trees or conifer trees. And for this particular tree, when you're looking for it, the leaves are a huge giveaway. They look a lot like little hand fans that are bright green, and they're kind of sort of feel like leather.
Yeah.
They're really
I used to
thick.
have one in my front yard.
And they have a shape that has two lobes.
Yes.
So the name,
Hence,
the species name,
biloba.
biloba.
That is literally my next bullet point, Victoria.
Oh, sorry. I'm stealing your
No,
thunder.
you're good. That's so beautiful. Speaking of beautiful, in the fall they turn like a bright saffron yellow. Generally speaking, in most of the season, it is a bright green. But in the fall, they turn a bright yellow, and within 15 days, sometimes all of the leaves can fall, just down.
Yeah.
These trees, kind of what we were touching on earlier, these trees have separate male and female trees. They are not all in one tree. The males will produce a pollen and get pollinated. The pollen that's produced eventually will go to the female trees. And the female, once they are pollinated, they will produce a seed that's encased in a fleshy fruit-like cone. So it's not a true fruit. A fruit is defined by a flower. It has to come from an ovum of a tree. And this is not coming from an ovum, so it's not a true fruit.
So is the pollen also on a cone, like with a conifer? Or what kind of structure is the pollen coming from if it's not a flower?
The pollen,
is that another question you were hoping we wouldn't ask?
They do have their own little pollen cones, very similar to a conifer, yes.
Okay.
It's just slightly different than a conifer cone. They're a little longer and everything. And technically, they are motile sperm. So like in ferns, mosses, and algae. So they move, which is weird. I wasn't expecting that in my research to come across that. Another thing that you touched upon, do you want to tell everyone, what does it smell like when that fruit-like cone falls onto the ground and splits open?
Well, we try to keep things clean on this podcast, so I'm going to say they smell like dog poop. Pretty much.
Nice.
Yeah, you start walking down the street and like, did I step in something? Oh, wait, no. It's just a ginkgo tree.
It's kind of a toss-up. I'm sure, they had to choose if they were going to plant the male trees or the female trees. And so generally in cities, a lot of landscape architects and whatnot don't want to plant the fruiting trees because they make a mess. Or in the case of the ginkgo are really stinky.
They stink.
But do you know the flip side of that, though? The other problem we get?
What?
So much for allergies.
Yeah, so all the male trees are the ones that put out all the pollen. And actually, ginkgos are wind pollinated, and they produce a ton of pollen. And so I know if you're an allergy sufferer like me for tree pollen, all those male trees are
Sneeze
worse
all of
than
the time.
several days of dog poop smell. But, these are the choices we make.
Yeah. I also heard...
I was going to say the fruits are really, they're pretty sticky. So when they're all over the sidewalk and you have to walk through them, it really does stick to your shoes. So then it's almost like you walked in dog poop.
Might as well at that point, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're already halfway there. I also, in my research...
People do eat them, though. People do eat them.
They do. It's not really good for you. It can cause a lot of gastrointestinal distress.
Isn't it like a traditional Chinese medicine ingredient or something? Or it's just a food?
Is. But there's not any scientific basis behind it being actually helpful.
Well.
Yeah. In my
Weird,
research,
it's almost like medieval medicine has evolved.
Right? Who would have guessed? Also in my research, I was reading that it could either smell like rancid butter or vomit.
There's a certain vomit
seeds.
aspect. It's like vomit mixed with dog poop, and
Jeez,
That's-
you're really selling
that's
it.
worse.
accurate.
And that's mainly due to the butyric acid that is in.
It's got butyric acid?
It's got butyric
Gosh,
acid.
I kind of want to do an episode just about butyric acid sometime.
I think
I got to put that on my list.
Buckle up, listeners. It's going to be really smelly.
It's a wild topic. Where's my pencil? All right, go on.
All right. But that's mainly what is causing that smell, along with a few other acids and
Chemicals,
chemicals.
Rachel.
Thank you. I'm staring down at my computer like, what is the word? Other chemicals that are in that fruit, in that seed. Overall, though, these trees are super, super resilient. Because of their leaves, they're pretty, and how leathery they are. Generally speaking, no insects will go after those leaves. They're too tough. So they're pretty resilient to insects. They're pretty disease resistant as well. And when they were studying those older trees, it seems like they don't, like they're slow growing, but age doesn't seem to affect them. In the fact that they were able to produce the photochemicals that they need indefinitely. Like it didn't seem to slow down. They weren't experiencing any senescence, like a lot of older things do when they age, which
like
is
humans.
really like
Yes.
humans. And just to give you a little more idea, this is my last little thing, but just to give you an idea how resilient these trees are. There were 6 trees that survived within a half mile to 1.25 miles of the blast at Hiroshima in 1945.
Wow.
Okay? And they're still alive today.
Cool.
They survived the atom blast. They were a half mile away from the drop zone, and they're fine. They're still alive.
That sounds pretty hardy.
It does indeed.
So they're pretty crazy and pretty strange.
Nice.
Well, that's what I have for you all today. We're going to take a quick break, and when we return, it will be Victoria.
Strange by Nature podcast is brought to you by listeners like you who have joined the Society of Strange, our membership group on over at patreon.com/strangebynature. Society of Strange members can join at one of 3 different membership levels and help support the show and also get some fun stuff like water bottle stickers or access to super secret content. So a thank you to those who have joined already to help make this podcast possible. If you haven't joined yet, we'll see you soon over at the Society of Strange at patreon.com/strangebynature. See you soon. Bye-bye. Back to the show.
All right, we're back. So the other week, when I was talking about cryptically extinct animals, I briefly mentioned, the thylacine. You guys remember the thylacine?
Mm-hmm.
Also known
it's one of my favorites.
Yes, also known as the Tasmanian tiger, although I don't really like that name. In the context I was talking about it, people keep seeing it, even though the last confirmed one died in 1936, and it almost certainly went extinct sometime in the 20th century. So thylacines, though, just on their own, are super cool and weird animals, and I wanted to talk about them some more.
Yay!
So, as I think I mentioned in the previous episode, thylacines were the largest known marsupial predator, and they looked really quite similar to a large dog, especially the shape of the head is very similar to a dog. The exception kind of was their tail. They have this very long, stiff tail that comes out of their body, looking a lot like a kangaroo tail, actually.
Right.
So you can kind of see the marsupial body plan there, to the extent that there is one.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the tiger name comes from the stripes that were on their back. Tiger-like stripes. Of course. So undog-like in that way. So just a little more about marsupials. You probably know some of this, but marsupials are those weird mammals where the fetus does not grow a placenta, and it's born at a very early stage of development. Like, it's practically an embryo when it crawls out of its mother's birth canal.
Yep. Yeah, they are.
So
very little effort needed on the mom's side there.
The only things that have really developed much are their forelimbs, so that they can crawl up to their mother's pouch, and then their mouth so that they can attach to a nipple. And then they finish developing in the pouch. And I'm sure we've all seen pictures of kangaroo babies sticking their heads out of their mother's pouch adorably.
Thank you, David Attenborough.
But the pouch of the thylacine was a little different. So for starters, the pouch faced backwards, which that's not unique to the thylacine. There are several other types of marsupials that have this. Wombat. So like any marsupial that's digging in the ground, like a wombat and burrowing, has a backward-facing pouch for a very important reason, so that it doesn't fill with dirt.
Right.
That's a good reason.
A dirt pouch.
Yeah. And actually, some marsupials have like a forward-facing pouch, sort of like an eye almost that can open and close. They have like a sphincter around.
I don't like that.
Our North American opossums are sort of like that. Just a side, slightly disturbing note. But thylacines were very unusual in that both sexes had a pouch.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so the only other marsupial that has this feature is still living, and it's the water opossum, which is in Central and South America.
Okay.
But so for males, I mean, the female function of the pouch is obvious. We just talked about it. But in males, it actually functions as an optional scrotal sac. So if they need to protect their junk, they can withdraw it into the pouch.
Kirk's face was just
That's not where I thought you were going with that. Oh, wow.
I mean
useful.
Yeah.
But, wow.
I'd use it to store snacks.
But then you have to reach way around behind to grab them, so that would be awkward.
Oh, that would be awkward. Never mind.
Yes, well, I'm glad you're going to use a scrotal sac for snacks.
Well, I wouldn't use
That's
it for
lovely.
that.
That's what you literally just said. But moving on.
Oh,
anyway. So not only does the thylacine somewhat resemble a canid, like a dog or a wolf, their skulls are actually remarkably similar to the skulls of wolves. And it's kind of almost a textbook example of convergent evolution because,
nice.
Love it.
Genetically, they're not closely related at all phylogenetically. They're not close at all on the tree of life.
Nope.
Wolves are placental mammals and thylacines are marsupials. But their place in the ecosystem led them to evolve some very similar features. That's what convergent evolution is. So it's really cool. And speaking of that skull, something different from a wolf is that their jaws opened to 80 degrees. They opened to an 80 angle. Yeah.
I was hoping you were going to talk about this.
It's
Hold on.
creepy.
80 degrees.
Well,
Rachel, there was video footage of this online. I shouldn't say video; it's film.
Yeah.
That one that died. You said 1936, was it?
1936.
Yeah, in the Hobart Zoo, they got some film of it, and it yawns at one point, and it's like, oh my gosh! And it's like
That's horrifying.
and it looks like it has so many teeth. It's not. I don't think it's very horrifying. It's like it's really fascinating and super cool.
Yeah.
And I don't think that one
go
even
for it.
opens its jaw. I didn't realize it was 80 degrees. It doesn't open at 80 in the video, but even in the video, you see it and you go, oh, that's not what a dog does, you know?
Right.
Oh no. Okay, that's fine. It's fine.
So at the time of European colonization, thylacines were found only in Tasmania. So it's a big island that's just to the south of the Australian continent. But archaeological evidence shows that thylacines were also originally native to New Guinea, and they survived in mainland Australia until approximately 2,000 years ago, possibly even more recently. There's some mixed evidence. There's been debate about why they disappeared from the mainland. The leading candidates are that there was kind of a big technological change and maybe some cultural influx from Southeast Asia around 4,000 years ago. That led to a population increase in Australia. But at the same time...
Population increase of humans?
Of humans,
I assume?
yeah, sorry, that's what I meant. Of humans, so there could have been greater hunting pressure, but then also dingoes were introduced to Australia around the same time. And so they think most likely it was competition with dingoes that kind of drove them to local extinction on the mainland.
I'll have to talk to my dogs about that since they both have dingo heritage. So we'll see.
Really?
Well, they're both Australian cattle dog mixes, and the cattle dog is part dingo, so it's very small. But I'll ask them about it.
Right.
There you go. I'm sure Ada will look at you really lovingly for that.
Yeah.
Likely.
So you can probably guess where this story is going next. Once Europeans arrived in Tasmania, they began to hunt the thylacine, mainly because it was perceived as a threat to sheep and other livestock.
Right.
And there were bounties put on them by the government. There was also habitat destruction, introduction of feral dogs that competed for food, and introduced diseases. So, all these factors combined led to the extinction of the thylacine. Ironically, they put the thylacine on the coat of arms of Tasmania. There are two thylacines holding that crest there. Yeah. So that's kind of the end of the story of the thylacine, except that while no research can be done on living thylacines, they died recently enough that scientists have been able to sequence the genome.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And just looping back to that convergent evolution with wolves, they've been doing interesting work comparing specific genes in thylacines and wolves to kind of suss out what those things were that kind of led to the convergent evolution.
Oh, wow.
Huh.
What makes this type of tooth, I think, or, this skull shape.
To see if those actually the same genes ended up getting selected for and whatnot.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
That's fascinating. That's a lot of hard work. Go science.
Go science. That's what I have to say about the thylacine today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Victoria.
You're welcome. We're going to have another little break, and it'll be Kirk's turn when we get back.
Welcome back, everybody. Last week, Rachel had that awesome topic about how flamingos might be responsible for the legend of the Phoenix, right? And if you somehow missed that episode, you got to go back and listen. But, Rachel, you casually dropped one fact into your story and didn't go into depth on it. You mentioned that flamingos are pink because of carotenoids in their diet. And I thought, as a bonus to your story, this week I'm going to talk about carotenoids.
Huh.
That's so exciting.
Kind of let people know what that is, because you sort of, blew right past it.
They do show
I had
up
a
a
lot
lot.
to cover.
And they show up a lot. So, this may not be, I'm going to just confession time. This may not be the strangest of nature topics, but it's one of those background bits of information that comes up a bunch. And so it's really useful information to have when you're talking about a lot of other really strange stuff. So, carotenoids are a group of molecules. They're all chains of 40 carbon atoms with a variable number of hydrogen atoms tacked on. That's basically what makes this group up. And they aren't just one thing. There's not like a thing called a carotenoid. I've seen different sources. A lot of people say around 600 or so. I've seen one source saying that there's as high as 750 different naturally occurring carotenoids that have been identified, which is pretty wild.
That's a lot.
We don't usually run into, that's like, some of those are probably pretty obscure, but those are the, how many have been cataloged. There's a couple that are the ones that we would be running into on sort of a regular basis. So we often refer to them as pigments, and we think of the carotenoids as a pigment because of how they interact with light. They actually absorb certain wavelengths of light and reflect other wavelengths, and so we see them or perceive them as orange, red, and yellow, because that's the light that bounces off these molecules. They give many naturally occurring things their color, not just flamingos like you talked about, but carotenoids are made in plants, algae, and even photosynthetic bacteria. Everybody listening, I guarantee, unless you do not have the ability to see, you have seen carotenoids. They make flamingos pink. They make autumn leaves yellow, and, for example, the ginkgo leaves you were just talking about, that yellow in there is from carotenoids. They also make the oranges in those leaves. They make tomatoes and apples red. They make bananas yellow, carrots orange. All those colors come from carotenoids. In fact, you may have noticed a similarity between the word carotenoid and carrot, and that is indeed because that is what they're named after. Carotenoids were first extracted from the roots of carrots when scientists were studying them. So
I was about to ask you if
exactly. And I had always kind of wondered, is that where it comes from? And it is, which is pretty cool. So
that's so fun.
You've not just seen carotenoids. You may have also heard of them by some of their other more specific names. So saying carotenoids is sort of like saying birds, right? It kind of describes a group of things. And then there's more specific ones that we may have heard of. And first up is one that I think is probably the most common one people run into, and that's beta carotene. So beta carotene is like a reddish orange color. It's sometimes actually used as a food coloring and as a coloring in cosmetics even. But basically it gives a lot of the color to many, many, many of the foods that we eat. Worldwide, beta carotene is the main source of provitamin A in the human diet. So I should explain a little bit of what that means, because it's to be clear, it is not vitamin A. It's a source of provitamin A, which means if we ingest it, our body can convert it into vitamin A. So somewhere over half of the vitamin A in our diet, this is obviously going to depend on what your diet is, but somewhere greater than 50% of the vitamin A that your body gets is actually derived from beta carotene that you eat in fruits and veggies, which is pretty cool. So
that is really cool.
I will say on that note, I don't know if it's as popular as it was, but there's this big food fad, the raw food fad was out there.
That was recent.
Oh my gosh. Like some people think that raw food was somehow better than cooked food because everything's like in its natural state. Well, here's the thing. Cooking plants that have beta carotene in it splits open the cell walls, which is where the beta carotene is, and then makes it more available to be absorbed. And this is true for pretty much all nutrients. Like most things, humans can get more nutrients out of them when they have been cooked. Also, beta carotene is fat soluble, not water soluble. So it needs to interact with a little bit of fat, and then our bodies absorb it kind of from the fat. So be sure to cook your carrots in a little bit of olive oil, and they're delicious, like I just did earlier
Buttered
this week.
carrots, also great.
Yeah, butter. Oh, butter. I mean, oh, don't get me started. Now,
So good.
too much beta carotene can be a bad thing, and perhaps this is the strange part of my topic. Just like flamingos turn, kind of pink, or when they eat some of this, the same thing can happen to humans. So,
Can we turn to orange?
yeah, humans can turn orange if you have too much beta carotene. I mean, you'd have to eat a lot of carrots, but especially if you're taking supplements or something like that, you could definitely turn orange. It's called carotenodermia, and it literally means orange skin. So you can turn orange.
It actually happened
Solid.
to a friend of mine in high school.
Really?
I think she had a little bit of an eating disorder.
Yeah.
And she was
Turned kind of
overloading
orange?
on carrots.
Oh my gosh. Well, that would do it. Good news is that it does go away if you just stop eating
Yeah.
the food. So it's not like a permanent change to your skin. It was even has been sold. I don't know if it still is sold, but it has been sold in the past as like a sunless tanner. So you take these pills, and it kind of gives you
that's
an
probably
orange
there.
glow to your skin.
Seems like a bad idea.
Yeah, that's not
That
recommended.
doesn't seem healthy.
No, it's not great. Generally, too much vitamins of any kind is generally a bad thing. And people are like, "Oh, I'm going to take a mega dose of XYZ vitamin," and usually most of the studies
Everything
done
in
show that that's a
balance.
bad. Yeah, everything in balance.
There's actually a toxic dose of most vitamins.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
Yes.
but they have studied different doses of different vitamins and things like beta carotene to see, could it be helpful medically? And one of the things they found isn't that it doesn't. There haven't been any really good studies that show that it's really like an important thing to have large doses of. Although we definitely do need it in regular doses for getting our vitamin A. They have shown that if you are a smoker and you take large doses of beta carotene, it could actually increase your chance of cancer, which is,
Interesting.
and I think maybe it has something to do with it. It helps oxidize, or it can oxidize in your lungs, and if your lungs are already damaged, it could cause more problems. So there actually are warnings on some beta carotenes not to take too much if you're a smoker. So how about some other carotenoids? Lycopene, have you heard of that one?
Yeah, tomatoes.
No.
Yeah, exactly. It's found in tomatoes, and I know some ketchup companies were like doing a really hard sell a few years ago and bragging about the lycopene you can find in ketchup, and they were like, "Dudes, you got to eat some lycopene," and they're trying to pump it up for men because there was a study that showed that it was good for prostate health and could like prevent prostate cancer. You don't see that claim on ketchup really much anymore because all the like
No.
larger studies that were done went wah wah and showed that there really wasn't any kind of effect.
You know what's probably not good for prostate cancer?
What's that?
Massive amounts of sugar that are in ketchup.
Well, that wasn't what they were studying. They weren't making any claims about their sugar content. They were just saying, hey, there's lycopene in here, which is true. And lycopene is actually from a different group that does not get converted into vitamin A. So basically, as far as we know right now, lycopene doesn't really do anything for us. But they're still studying it. Lycopene, interestingly, I'm guessing most of you have cursed lycopene. I was trying to combine like iocane with lycopene. That's
We're
totally
going
different.
back to iocane.
That also comes from
powder.
Australia. All right, so lycopene, I know is the bane of my existence at times because it stains plastic. And if you ever stored a tomato-based leftover in plastic,
yeah.
you discover that it kind of turns orange afterwards. That's the lycopene. Any kind of porous surface, it will stain. And no amount of scrubbing with water will ever remove it because, well, science. Lycopene is nonpolar, which means water will not work to break it down and remove it. I will give you a little tip here, though. If you wash it in water with bleach, the chlorine will polarize the lycopene, and it can then be dissolved by the water. Aha! Chemistry to the rescue. So
I feel like putting it through the dishwasher, if you have a dishwasher, also usually does the trick.
there might be some things in the detergents that will also remove some of that.
Do that, yeah.
So the last one I have for you, don't worry, I'm not doing all 750 carotenoids, is lutein, right? So lutein comes from the Latin word for yellow, and it is, you guessed it, yellow. So it's a yellow pigment. It's the yellow color in many leaves and root vegetables. It's also, interestingly, the color yellow in egg yolks. So
That's where I've heard of it. I think.
yeah, and it looks yellow because it's so good at absorbing blue light, so it reflects a lot of yellow. And what I think is really interesting is some farmers will actually feed it to chickens to produce better looking eggs with like yellower, like, yolks. And I think
that's so funny.
if you have really well-fed chickens, they're going to have very yellow yolks because they're getting a lot of different nutrients in their diet. But just to make them look better, they'll also just feed that to the chickens.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is interesting.
I think
why not?
if you have real free-range chickens that are scratching and eating bugs, and they get lots of
they get
the
natural
natural sources of lutein.
Yeah.
And so the yolks wind up super kind of yellowy orange.
Exactly. Now people have figured this out. They've also, some farmers who are fish farmers will feed it to their fish as well, because it can make the flesh of the fish have a more natural color like you would expect to get with a wild caught fish.
Salmon.
Okay.
Like salmon, yeah. So and so it's really cool that you have people are figuring out like, the health of these animals that are farm raised. I mean, is it for their health, or is it just to make the consumers go, ooh, that looks nice, I want to eat that? Bit of both. But I think it's kind of cool.
Bit of both.
Yeah. So there is actually with lutein a little bit of research that's been done that actually has shown that it is important for eye health and can actually reduce the effects of macular degeneration by up to like 25%. So really a significant reduction in that. So could be good for your eyes.
Yeah, wow.
So
I remember growing up being told, eat your carrots, it's good for your eyesight.
Oh.
I blame the Looney Tunes.
I wasn't going to go into that. I'm going to save that for another episode. Because the story behind carrots and why we tell people it's good for your eyesight is a fascinating story that I do not. This would be like an hour-long podcast if I go into that. So I'll save it for a couple weeks from now. We'll go into that. Okay. But basically, it is interesting, and I guess not surprising that these naturally occurring molecules are in our food and get used by our bodies and have effects on our bodies. So they are a continuing source of study for scientists because we are still learning how they affect us. And they have turned out to be pretty useful, and we end up learning more about them every year. So now you too know a little bit about carotenoids.
Awesome. Thank you, Kirk.
Cool.
No problem.
Yeah, thanks, Kirk.
Well, thanks everybody for coming along on the ride this week.
Yeah, see you next week.
Talk to you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks everyone for listening to today's show. Be sure to subscribe. New episodes drop every Wednesday, and we love sharing this strange world with all of our listeners. If you would be so kind as to leave us a 5-star review, that would be great. It lets other lovers of the strange discover the show. You can reach out to us on social media by searching for Strange by Nature Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can send us an email as well. Our address is contact@strangebynaturepodcast.com. If you want more information about the show, you can also check out our website, which is strangebynaturepodcast.com. Until next week, get outside, stay curious, and embrace the strange.